Third chapter, verse 39. Avratam gnanam etena gnanino nitya vairina kama rupena kaunteya dushpurena nadena cha. Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Wise living entity. So the living entity, Krishna is calling us wise. Wise living entity is pure consciousness. So in the spiritual world, we are wise, our consciousness is pure. But when we fall down to this material world, we become foolish and contaminated consciousness. So how does this happen? When it becomes covered by this eternal enemy, the form of lust. So basically, love for Krishna in the spiritual world gets converted to lust in the material world. This we already discussed a couple of verses back. So this is eternal enemy. Eternal enemy because it can attack us anytime, and it is an enemy because this is not good for us. It takes us away from Krishna, and it is eternal because even after going from material world to spiritual world, also there is possibility of fall down because we have our free will, and this eternal enemy is always there. And it is never satisfied. It burns like fire. And there's fire, if somebody puts heat to the fire, it just burns and burns. So like this lust, when we cater to lust, then it burns like fire and it is never satisfied. We experience this in our life. Purport. It is said in Manu Smriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. So fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. So like that, actually sense enjoyment also there is a constant supply. And if we keep satisfying, here it is saying any amount of sense enjoyment. And that means that if every desire that we get, if we try to fulfill all of those, still one's lust cannot be satisfied. It will just keep increasing. So if we think that, oh, okay, I will just fulfill this desire of mine, then I will keep quiet. Or maybe after, if I fulfill it, then it will reduce. No, it will just keep increasing. Actually, Bhagavatam gives instances of so many, pastimes where this lust was because it did not get fulfilled. Those people became dejected, and then they came to the path of reality. So fulfilling it will not help. Frustration will possibly help. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maithunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of material existence of a living entity. So this is known basically people who can remain without indulging in sex life can become brahmacharis and remain naistika brahmacharis. Otherwise, for everybody else, it is Maithun Agara. It is a prison house which is based on this in civilized society based on marriage and sex life indulged in marriage, and in uncivilized society, it is just people just engage in irresponsible sex life. But either way, whether civilized or uncivilized, that is a basis. And in civilized, where marriage happens, then there is expansion. Stree means expand. So from one person, then they become two. When there's marriage, then children, 3, 4, etc., etc. So it just keeps expanding. Mm, mm. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing duration of material existence, because otherwise we could technically we could get liberated. Mm. If we don't engage in sense gratification, because then whatever karma phala is there will get exhausted. But here it is saying, if 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 the civilization itself is based on sense gratification, then people will engage in more and more sense gratification, which means that they will have to remain in this material world for longer. Therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. So this is very important, that lust is a symbol of ignorance. This trying to enjoy independent of Krishna is belongs to the mode of ignorance, because we really forget ourselves. We are in darkness, no knowledge, and so we tend to engage in trying to satisfy ourselves independent of Krishna. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. This is very important actually. So first is, we should understand there is some feeling of happiness. It's not like really satisfying or anything. Like, trying, if you're looking for water in a desert and we get some few drops of water, that's not going to satisfy us. But there's some feeling of happiness. But this so-called feeling of happiness, because it's so-called because it's actually not real. It's like in a dream. It's like in a movie. When we are seeing a movie and, for whatever reason we laugh and we become happy. It is like that. It actually doesn't really exist. Because doesn't really exist in the sense it's in the context of that movie that there is happiness, and once person comes out of the movie, then that happiness is gone. Similarly, once we are till we are in this body, this happiness is there. So once we give up this body, happiness is gone. It's so called, it is like temporary. But important point is, it is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer, because he feels some happiness, so he thinks, okay, maybe I should engage more, and maybe there is more happiness, maybe I should try more, because there is some experience. See, if there is completely no happiness at all, then people would have given up, saying that, okay, this is useless, it's not giving me any happiness. But there is some feeling. So people are expecting, oh, maybe next time I will try it differently. I will, uh, same sense gratification, but maybe in a different way, different place. uh, like people keep going from one country to another, seeing newer and newer places, but never get satisfied. They say, oh, okay, this was nice. Now next, where should we go? So there is no contentment here in this, right? So this is the ultimate enemy. Mm. So in fact, those who have experienced frustration in their life, in their material desires, they are fortunate, because that brings them to Krishna consciousness. Artho artharthi jigna sugnani. Somehow, we even frustration, whatever, as long as something brings us to Krishna, we are fortunate, right? But this having the some feeling of happiness is very dangerous, because then we'll get kind of stuck. So this lust is like that. All kinds of sense gratification, trying to enjoy independent of Krishna. Please remember, it is our eternal enemy. It is our eternal enemy. We should not get stuck here. And in force of circumstances, if we are made to engage in some activities, like, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Raghunath Das Goswami, saying that externally you just be like normal, like a sense enjoyer, like normal person, ordinary person, but internally remain fixed in Krishna, which means that internally we are renounced, externally we are just saying, okay, to satisfy somebody, so that my Krishna consciousness doesn't get badly affected. So we just do things sometimes to satisfy other people. But internally we should be completely detached from these things, and definitely not engaged in trying to satisfy ourselves. So this lust. Verse 40. Indriyani manobuddhir rasyadishtanam uchyate eter vimohyati esha gnanam avritya dehinam. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So now Krishna is saying, okay, so lust is your eternal enemy. Now where is this lust sitting? So that you can defend yourself, or you are at least aware of, if there's an enemy, we should know whereabouts of the enemy. So Krishna is saying, okay, this enemy is there in three places. All super critical. Is there in our senses, is there in the mind, is there in the intelligence. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Covers the real knowledge that we don't belong to this material world. This place is temporary. We are servants of Krishna. We have to serve Krishna. This is real knowledge. Lust covers. Because if this knowledge exists, then we cannot try to enjoy ourselves independent of Krishna. So lust covers the knowledge so that we forget that. Even if momentarily we forget and we try to engage in sense gratification. And then we become bewildered. Saying, why did I engage in this? Purport. The enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul, and therefore Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all activities of the senses. And thus, when we hear about sense objects, the mind generally becomes a reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification. See, at least if it was only some senses, maybe you could say, okay, I will close my eyes, I will close my ears, etc., etc. But mind, which is the center of all the senses, just by thinking, we might have heard something many months back, years back, maybe we were forgotten. Suddenly one day it will come up in our memory. And just by that, once that thought comes into the mind, that itself becomes a reservoir of all ideas of sense enjoyment. So reservoir, we will keep making, different pictures in our mind, like how we will enjoy. So it's just completely in the mind, mental concoction, but it drags us. It's so powerful. So this dhyato vishan pumsan, just one thought coming to the mind, and that is enough to pull us down. So the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. So whatever we see, whatever we think, we are always thinking about how can I enjoy, how can I enjoy, how can I enjoy. Because lust is sitting here in the senses, in the mind. So lust's job is to try and enjoy independent of Krishna. So strategic position, right? Like every moment we are in touch with sense objects, every moment our lust is active and striking to drag us down. As a result, the mind and the senses become repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital. Now, at least if mind has to be under the control of intelligence. Because at least the intelligence would have not been affected by lust. At least good, proper intelligence could have helped the mind saying, okay, this is not right. This is the right decision to do. Now, since intelligence is also affected, intelligence is also thinking, how can I enjoy? How can I enjoy? How can I enjoy? So the one which has the power to discriminate is also affected. The one which doesn't have power to discriminate but which has the strength to willpower to do things, the mind, that is also affected. The senses are also affected. Well, really contaminated situation, powerfully contaminated. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire false ego. So this is the critical piece. Because of lusty intelligence, we acquired false ego and identify ourselves with matter and thus with the mind and senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this is true happiness. So this is what we are doing today. Because of lusty intelligence, the spirit soul has acquired false ego. Of course, when we fell down from the spiritual world, we acquired this false ego because of that lusty intelligence. Now, because we have this false ego, the spirit soul is addicted to enjoying material senses, addicted because of this false ego. Because I think that this is what I am. I am this body. I need to enjoy. So people are addicted to material senses. And they're mistaking it as true happiness because they don't really know that there is something higher than this. So this false ego, actually, this is the whole key. This is the key of our problem. Is this false ego, relating ourselves to this material world, to this matter, and thinking that this whole matter is there for our enjoyment. This is the problem of our existence in this material world. This false ego goes only when we come to this platform of Pranada Pisunichena. Only then we understand, okay, I'm servant of Krishna. I am not supposed to try and enjoy myself. This is not my real position. So it's really, I mean, very tricky situation ours, right? Like mind, intelligence, senses, everything attacked by lust. Lust binds us into this material world. Now we have to escape all this. So we should be attracted to something which is super powerful. That is why Krishna says in the second chapter, Shayavinivartante niraharasya dehinah rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. So that we have to see that param drishtva. We have to experience higher taste. Otherwise, this whole binding mechanism is so powerful that practically it looks impossible to come out. This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yashatma buddhi kuna petri dhatuke swadi kalathradishu bhauma ijjati yatirtha buddhi salilena karichit janeshu abhigneshu saiva gokaraha. A human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self. That means that he identifies the body as himself. He considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen. Considers the land of birth worshipable, and goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take bath. Rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge, he is considered to be ass or crow. So he considers himself to be the body, considers byproducts of body as important, place of birth as important, and goes to a place of pilgrimage simply to take bath, give bath to the body, and no sense of soul. This person is considered like an ass or a cow. So this is, we are really stuck. So we need spiritual strength. We need spiritual strength. So that's where all this is heading towards. 41. Tasmatvam indriyanyado niyamya paratarshava papmanam prajiyenam gnanam vijnanam nashanam. Therefore, Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So this lust will destroy knowledge and self-realization because it will not allow somebody to come to the platform of Atma Gnana, knowledge of the self. So it's saying in the beginning, very beginning curb, which means that don't let this lust grow. So, Homaram Acharit Pragno. I think Prabhupada quotes that. Not here. So from a very young age, one has to engage in bhakti so that this symbol of sin can be curbed, controlled. Because if you engage in bhakti from earlier on, we regulate the senses. Also, we also should try and regulate by following the rules and regulations that has been given to us. The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization, specific knowledge of the self. Jnana refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non-self, or in other words, knowledge that the spirit soul is not the body. That is real jnana, knowledge. That spirit soul is not the body. Vijnana refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul's constitutional position and its relationship to the Supreme Soul. Vijnana refers to specific knowledge of spirit soul's constitutional position. This is Sambandha Gnana, which is relation. What is the relationship with the Supreme Lord? This is Vijnana. Is explained thus in Srimad Bhagavatam. Nanam paramam guhyam me yat vijnana samanvitam sa rahasyam tadangam cha grana gaditam maya. The knowledge of the self and super self is very confidential and mysterious. But such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if explained with their various aspects by the Lord Himself. Bhagavad Gita gives us that general and specific knowledge of the self. The Lord is explaining here how the self is attacked by eternal enemy. So he's explaining strategically how we are stuck. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. This is that Kaumaram Acharit Pragno. From the age of 5, one should be engaged in Krishna consciousness. So that one should learn Krishna consciousness in that early age so that one may become fully Krishna conscious. If we come very late in our life, it's not that it's not possible. Anytime, Prabhupada said, even in a moment we can become fully Krishna conscious. But generally, if they're given proper training from very young age, children can become fully Krishna conscious and then perfect their life. Lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. This we already discussed. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love cannot deteriorate into lust. This is very important. So when we are small, we still have that natural love, which is not deteriorated, which is not contaminated, not deteriorated into lust. That means that there is a lot more possibility of us retaining that love and engaging in the service of the Lord. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. So this we have experienced, right? Because it becomes like second nature to enjoy independent of Krishna. Every aspect of our life, every aspect practically, we're always thinking, how can I enjoy? How can I enjoy? How can I enjoy? So it's become like our nature. So just reversing that, we all know how much difficulty we might be facing to reverse this condition. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles. So this is the key. Even one is a late beginner, no problem. Even one has spent a lot of their time engaging in sense gratification in this life, no problem. But we should follow regulative principles. So we should follow what the acharyas are saying. Do's and don'ts we should strictly follow. Not like, it's okay, chalta hai. Then we can't. We can't achieve love of God. We can remain in bhakti, so-called bhakti, and take lifetimes, and then maybe make progress or maybe even fall down. Depends, right? But if one follows regulative principles strictly, then there is all possibility that one can become lover of God. So from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, any time of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, and that this is important, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service. Begin regulating senses in Krishna consciousness, which means not artificially control senses. So we have to control senses like Ambarish Maharaj did. Savemana Krishna Padara Vindayor. Engage all the senses in the service of Krishna, and then that lust will will turn into love of God, the highest perfectional stage of human life. So the key here is very beginning curb the symbol of lust. So which is why I keep telling parents, saying that you don't adopt Krishna consciousness for yourself if you're not interested, no problem. But please adopt for your children, because from the early age, if they become Krishna conscious, then their life will become a success. So this is very, very important. Other application of this is When there is a indication of lust, when there's an indication of lust, early indication, curb it. Early indication of lust, don't fuel it at least. If there is some thought that coming to mind and we know that we will end up indulging in that thought, at least we should not encourage this thought. We should ignore the thought, cut the thought, bring in Krishna's lotus feet, chant the holy name. Somehow we have to cut off surrendering to Krishna, depending on Krishna, we should cut off that thought. So this is also very important. Otherwise, if we feed that thought, then there is all chances that we fall down. We'll fall down. So this is a practical tip. This could be for any kind of lust that we might be stuck in. Okay. Indriyani paranyahur indriyabhya param manaha manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe paratastu saha. So now Krishna is now revealing what is the secret, how do we get out. Working senses are superior to dull matter, mind is higher than senses, intelligence is still higher than the mind, and the soul is even higher than the intelligence. But the soul is now stuck thinking it to be the body and engaging in sense enjoyment. But Krishna is saying soul is higher than even intelligence. So even if intelligence is affected by lust, even if mind is affected by lust, even if senses are affected by lust, it is okay, because soul is higher than even intelligence and soul is pure. So this is the key. The senses are different outlets of the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole, because senses give vent to the lust. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions as described here ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. So, if we work in this order, senses, higher than senses mind, higher than mind intelligence, higher than intelligence soul, higher than soul super soul. So we will end up in Krishna consciousness. Bodily action means function of the senses. Stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act. So somebody might say, okay, senses require engagement, so I will put all the senses to rest. Thereby I will contain lust. But what will happen? Mind is working all the time. But above the mind is the determination of intelligence. So actually, if a well-behaved mind will be under the control of intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul. It is if therefore, this is the key. Therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme in devotional service. Naturally, all other subordinates, namely intelligence, mind, senses, become automatically engaged. So we observe this. So it's so beautiful. when we engage in the service of the Lord, naturally our intelligence becomes engaged. Suppose say we have to do some service for the Lord, then immediately intelligence starts working. Okay, what is the best way of doing? How do I do? Where do I get this stuff? How do I do? Etc. Intelligence automatically enjoyed. Mind becomes enjoyed when so whole existence becomes engaged. So simple. Just think about something. That is why I said, like we should engage in the service of the Lord. Practical service, right? Like practical service means, if suppose say we have to do some, we have to do decorate the Lord or, garland or say some program, appearance day, disappearance day, so many things. Or, like if you're trying to serve spiritual master, like, His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj is coming this Sunday. Now, we are fully the thought process is only, okay, how to serve, what do we know, what arrangements need to be made, etc. So then there's no chance that we will involved in any kind of lust, because our whole existence, including mind, intelligence, everything is engaged in thought process, directly engaged in the service of the Supreme. So this is the key. That is why Krishna consciousness has a solution answer to all problems, right? In the Kathopanishad, there is a similar passage in it. It's said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses and the mind is superior to the sense objects. if therefore the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there's no chance that the senses will become engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. Param drishva nivartate. Like I said, if the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of its being engaged in lower propensities. Higher taste, that is why param drishva. When we are engaged in higher taste, we are not interested in the lower taste. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, great. Therefore, the soul is above all sense objects, senses, mind, intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of soul is the solution of the whole problem. So clear. So, knowing that the soul is higher than intelligence, we should engage in the activities of the soul. That means that we should engage in our constitutional position. This is the solution of the whole problem. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. So one should use intelligence, saying that who are we, why are we here? We should ask all these questions and finally come to the conclusion saying, okay, this is my constitutional position to be a servant of Krishna. So and then engage in Krishna consciousness. This solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from objects of senses. But aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. By intelligence, one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness. By complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. So let's try to understand this. Besides, but aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. How? If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness by complete surrender, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. So intelligence has to be used to somehow engage ourselves in Krishna consciousness. That is intelligence. So at least the lusty intelligence has to be converted. By intelligence, somehow if we can engage in Krishna consciousness, so which means that if we are engaged in the service of Krishna, then our intelligence becomes engaged, then automatically mind becomes stronger. So mind, which is, work is only to accept and reject, it becomes stronger, saying that, okay, this is not conducive. Let me not engage in this. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind and the senses also, still unless it is strengthened by the association with Krishna, in Krishna consciousness, there's every chance of falling down to the due to the agitated mind. So basically what Prabhupada is saying here is that, soul is of course master of intelligence, but without one being in Krishna consciousness, without the soul being strengthened by association of Krishna, there is every chance of fall down. So which means that simply by gnana, saying that, oh, I am soul, I am part and parcel of Krishna, so I should not engage in lust, it may not work. Though the soul has to be strengthened. The soul is now in a very weak condition. In the sense, because it is accepted saying that it is a body. Completely controlled or captured by this bodily consciousness. So we have to strengthen the soul, saying that no, you are servant of Krishna. So, but how do we strengthen? By association with Krishna. See, this is so powerful. Because this whole lust is so powerful, we need to associate with Krishna. Otherwise, there's always chance to fall down. So one should not be complacent, saying that I'm in Krishna consciousness for so many years, so nothing will happen to me. No. Any moment we can fall down because this lust is so powerful. So we have to engage, associate with Krishna and Krishna consciousness by chanting his holy name, by serving his devotees, by doing worship of his Archa Vigraha, deity. We should strengthen ourselves, strengthen our soul by association with Krishna. So this is what Krishna says in this Last verse. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstapya atmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental, material, senses, mind, and intelligence. So, my dear Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence. So, that lustful intelligence has to be converted into spiritual intelligence, and this is deliberate. Deliberate means that we have to push in a particular direction, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So, what is required is spiritual strength. How will we get spiritual strength? By engaging in Krishna consciousness. So, for which we might require knowledge. So, by gaining gnana, we train the intelligence to do the right things, to engage in Krishna consciousness. And as we engage more and more in Krishna consciousness, our spiritual strength keeps on increasing. Then we can conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. And when we conquer this, we practically cover, have surpassed anartha nivritti. So this is very, very important that somehow or the other we should engage in Krishna consciousness. And if we associate with Krishna nicely in Krishna consciousness, then we develop spiritual strength by that association with Krishna. And then we can conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So the key is that engagement in activities of devotional service, all our senses, mind, intelligence, everything should have experienced higher taste. Param drishtva nivartate. When our whole existence has experienced a higher taste, then we don't have interest to engage in lower taste. Even if we are dragged into it, we will say, no, this is not required. This is just some vasana from my previous life. It's not beneficial. It doesn't even give me happiness. It's just misery. So let me not engage. So we'll develop that deliberate spiritual intelligence. We protect ourselves from falling down to lustful propensities. We engage ourselves in Krishna consciousness. We become more and more stronger, and we conquer this lust. This third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness. By knowing oneself as the eternal servator of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without considering impersonal voidness, the ultimate end, in the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul, which is lust. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, mind, and intelligence. And all of us have experienced this, different degrees, right? By the strength of Krishna consciousness. As soon as we start chanting very soon, we experience changes. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden. But by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind. A steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. What does it mean, steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity means? Because I'm the soul, I have to engage in Krishna service. That is steady intelligence. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. In the immature stage, he must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. So Prabhupada is saying, immature stage, all this gnana and all will themselves not help. Or yoga will not help. One should be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. So which is why in the other processes, it takes lifetimes for us to progress. But in bhakti, the progress is also very fast. The curbing of lust also is very fast. So everything is very fast. It's a very powerful process to engage in Krishna consciousness, associate with Krishna, develop spiritual strength, overcome lust. So powerful end to third chapter. highlighting the power of bhakti, Krishna consciousness. Okay, so let me stop here. Anyway, we are end of the chapter. Any questions, anybody on this last